Yeah, Gordo is a very well known in ham circles. He is very big in education, and he is also a co-host of the Ham Nation. It's on Wednesday nights, and I've had several requests to have him speak for us, and I was able to contact him and get him to come out and talk with us. He's going to talk about emergency communications.
All right. Well, a very good evening to the, let's see if I can get it right, Okai Amateur Radio Society. Did I say that right?
Okai in Ohio, Kentucky, Indiana.
Okay. Want to make sure I got that right. Well, as those that are getting into ham radio, plus our one almost ham radio operator knows, the FCC rules and regulations, here they are clear that one of our purposes as an amateur radio operator is emergency communications. And that's in part 97.1C Charlie. So many of you have all sorts of great qualifications. American Red Cross, they've been doing a great job on WindLink. American Radio Relay League with their ARS restarted program, very, very strong now. Many of you may be EMTs and have an amateur radio group with them. Many of you may have a patch for your city. As I do, I work closely with our United States Coast Guard and California Rescue because we're out here on the West Coast. But as we know, emergency communications are a vital part of ham radio. Over the years, I've recorded many high frequency as well as local emergencies, as well as some on the East Coast and Gulf Coast and even the Great Lakes. And we can learn a lot from emergency communications. First of all, brand new hams, when taught in a good ham radio class on how to respond to an emergency, as you can hear with this recording, these hams have been on the air for only maybe 3 weeks, and a huge California fire broke out, and they were the very first to spread the word in some of the remote areas via
6 MSI, Tango Shelter Delta. Fire is spreading over the Country Club Drive rapidly. 5 homes are in immediate danger. We need evacuation now of these homes.
Now, at the Emergency Operations Center, the ham in charge was allowing third-party traffic because of the emergency nature of this. So the fire chief, who was also a ham, came on with his response back to that station.
Copy that. Be advised that Sheriff's Dispatch is activating the CERT team at this time for the evacuations, and the water company has been notified, also Public Works.
So that was a good perfectly timed ham radio transmission. And interesting to note, I don't know about your community emergency response team program in your neck of the woods, but out here in California, a lot of money has poured into the fire department to develop these CERT teams. And while the CERT teams may only have little tiny FRS radios that barely go a couple of blocks, that's perfect for ham radio operators to work with those CERT teams and take those block reports and then relay them back to the EOC.
Break. 4 homes on Country Club engulfed in flames. We require further resources, and we still have no water pressure at this time. Carroll County Fire copy. Resources from the original fire ground are being redeployed to those areas. Helicopters are incoming to make water drops on those structures.
So you see, ham radio plays an important part with these fire comms, not to ever try and replace the great fire radio systems that our public safety officials have, but rather to provide eyes and ears and even smell to those fires around us. All of this was on the 2-meter FM ham band. Well, let's now go down to high frequency, and we're going to turn into a very famous hurricane, devastating, one of the worst, Katrina, and tune in on 40 meters and listen to one of the first reports as Katrina was approaching shore, still about 80 miles away, And listen to this report coming in on high frequency.
Roger, we had about 3 inches of rain since last night. About 3 inches of rain since last night. We don't have any electricity. The whole block is out. And the winds, I'm estimating, we're gusting up over 50. We have broken branches lying around. And I wanted to say, I'm at 29. My position.
Wow. While it wasn't the most clear communications, those hams that work DX and take part in high-frequency contests using sideband was able to hear all of that, especially the winds coming in at 50 miles per hour. Well, as Katrina came ashore, there were ham radio operators that were assigned to different agencies as backup, and one was in Slidell serving the National Weather Service. He came in with this report that the Slidell Weather Service, well, you can hear what happened to the weather.
Okay, I'm getting a report from Alpha Delta 5, Delta Papa, that the National Weather Service in Slidell has lost all HF radio operations. Over.
Wow, they lost all of their HF ops? Well, no problem. This ham says, well, let me have the end of your coaxes that were going to backup antennas that I have. And he was now able to get them back on the air using some of those wild mobile antennas on his vehicle. So for those of you that have the big giant bug catchers and you pull into the parking lot and everybody goes, oh my God, what's he got on there? You've become the hero when you're able to patch the National Weather Service onto some of those big antennas and adjust them to some of the NTIA frequencies that they had there. Well, as Katrina came ashore, the high frequency reports went down to 75 meters as the band into the evening hours faded away on 40. And this came in about 9 o'clock at night, California time.
Roger, he says he's losing trees going down at this time. Over.
Well, losing trees, and we heard that a lot. And then nothing. There was like no comms. And even on 75, well, the next morning, the news report was the New Orleans area was obviously spared because we're not getting any reports of any major damage in New Orleans due to Katrina. Oh no, this one ham with his HF mobile goes to the top of a parking garage of what's left of a parking garage in New Orleans and came out with this report 3 hours before the national news began to say, I think we got problems in New Orleans.
New Orleans is shut down. New Orleans has got major destruction, and they've got the roof off the Superdome. They've got water in the business district. They've got, you probably know better from the national TV coverage than we do. We have no TV. All we have is
What we have, luckily, is ham radio. So, well, the roof didn't quite come off the Superdome, but certainly the water came in. So again, it points out the importance of ham radio in a widespread emergency. We have so many operators that can check these places out and get words, get the word to, who do we get the word to? Well, here's someone on the air, 14.325 megahertz.
we are transferring information to the National Hurricane Center, and that helps the forecasters to predict landfall and tracking of the hurricane. Okay, so with that said, are there any stations on the southwest coast of Florida that have hurricane strength winds?
Yeah, they had plenty. So it points out volunteers, all the volunteers that staff the National Weather Service in Miami, they play such an important part. And again, these are ham radio volunteers that get out there when the chips are down. Now let's go back to 2 meters. Let's go to New York City. Here's a ham that witnessed something, and this ham was so struck by what he was seen that at first it was an open mic and you can hear some of the stuff in the background before he finally picks up the mic to his lips and says what he's seen. Imagine this one morning in New York City.
The World Trade Center, tower number 1 is on fire. The whole outside of the building was just a huge explosion. We have a number of floors on fire. It looked like the plane was aiming towards the building. Transmitted third alarm. We'll have the staging area at Vesey and West Street. Have the third alarm assignment go into that area. Second alarm assignment report to the building, okay?
Oh, the 9/11 World Trade Center on fire. Huge communications via ham radio because the Trade Center, when it collapsed, took down many of the public safety repeaters. But the hams had backup, especially in New Jersey, and especially those that immediately went across the river to the American Red Cross in New Jersey and was handling communications out of there. So it points out that you never know where ham radio emergency communicators are going to come up. And the big thing is, are they trained? Have they worked emergencies before? Have they done a ton of bicycle drills and all the other drills to be able to get their messages through? Well, down south of there, Washington, D.C., yep, they too, well, luckily, no, they certainly had their share of the aftermath of 9/11. But a few months after that, they had their own earthquake. Listen to this report.
Horizontal motion lasted approximately 10-15 seconds. Very light. Over.
Well, luckily, very, very light earthquake there. Well, out here in California, we get earthquakes on almost every week. In fact, we had one just yesterday, not a biggie, but when earthquakes hit, the question is, does your operation have a frequency that everybody knows to go to give their earthquake reports as they're driving on a road, as these hams are doing?
86 MVD for a damage report on a freeway. MVD, go ahead with the damage report on freeway.
By the way, ladies, they make the greatest net control operators. They are sharp and they are clear as a bell.
4 miles north of Demishon on the 405. There's quite a bit of buckling in 2 different places. There's a lot of concrete up, so you got to go through there real slow.
So it's important that emergency groups, such as the many members that are here tonight are members of, that there's a plan that when something big happens in your community, what repeater or what simplex frequency will everyone go to? Well, on this same repeater that remains usually silent all night long, with usually a dedicated control operator on duty, a few minutes passed, and then this report came in, and we'll play it twice, and let's see if you can hear what this operator is saying on the first time. It's a male operator, and this is preceded again by a great net control lady on.
210, and what section? That will be eastbound and westbound. Here in Washington, the bridges are down.
The what? Try that one again.
That will be eastbound and westbound. Here in Washington, the bridges are down.
The bridges are down. Here in the Southern California area, when we had the Northridge earthquake, it was so destructive up north of us that it actually knocked down some of our freeway bridges in the Marina del Rey area. So, wow, you never know what's going to happen. Well, we know that earthquakes don't travel near as fast as radio waves. So on 75 meters, here's a couple of hams that were communicating, and one goes, whoa. You're going to have a earthquake tremor in about 2 or 3 seconds from now.
They said that the quake was felt first in Westchester, then it was felt a few seconds later in
A few seconds later,
Thousand Oaks. A report on from 80 meters, WD60XM. WD60 at HL Segundo. Okay, the El Segundo station. That's WD60 at HL Segundo, located next to Westchester. Two sharp jolts felt east to west.
now the east to west and so on, during periods of earthquakes, many of the hams actually have pendulums, and they report which way they are swinging. And this was maybe 20 years ago for that recording. Now it's all automated by many of the coast and geodetic survey stations, so they can see electronically without the pendulums what's happening. But that's what we did back then. And sometimes when there's an emergency, it's good to sort of stay calm and not levity, but put a little human interest into what's going on. As this
In Long Beach, it lasted several seconds. We had a couple things fall down, and the bird went crazy.
Now, the bird went crazy has nothing to do with emergency preparedness, but part of our emergency preparedness is to stay calm, give a deliberate report, and not sound stressed over the air.
Well, this is starting something I've done here for years. Sort of an east-west, but some vertical motion. And there was two peaks, a little bit at first, then a big peak, and then it almost died down, then it hit us harder for the second time.
So again, the question is, when something big happens in your neck of the woods and the Great Lakes and so on, what channel, what frequency on 2 meters or the 440 band or on DMR will folks go to give their reports? On high frequency, 14300 is the Seafarers Net, the Maritime Mobile Net, the Intercontinental Maritime Mobile Net. There are always radio operators that guard that channel. Well, when this report came out, they knew it was a biggie, and it came from a ham in Japan saying, we have just had our largest earthquake in Japan. The tsunami has taken out our nuclear reactors. And at the same time out here on the west coast of the United States and in Hawaii, the National Weather Service and Coast and Geodetic announced that a tsunami was coming. Well, we tuned into a ham in Hawaii, and he says, we're getting ready. Because remember, tsunamis travel about 400 miles an hour, a lot slower than radio waves. So they had a few hours of advance warning. And here's a ham, KH6 Romeo Charlie, observing Hilo, Hawaii. And as he's watching the Hilo harbor, the water goes out and the water comes in and the water goes way out. Well, take a listen to his report from Hilo, Hawaii, and the tsunami coming.
Just an update from the Big Island of Hawaii. It's been reported that the water is receding in Hilo too on the breakwater as well as at a couple of the beaches. So I just passed the information along. I'm on the southern end, and that's the report from Hilo, Hawaii. That's the net KH6RC.
And a few hours later, we had the tsunami come ashore here along the west coast, did major damage up in Oregon, did considerable damage along the west coast outside of Southern California and Oceanside and Dana Harbor, where the water, it's not a huge tidal wave, it's actually tidal action that raises the water level 2 and 3 and 4 feet. We did reports from Newport Harbor for the U.S. Coast Guard. Well, now let's go back to 2 meters. And here is a school bus with kids on it on a retreat on an island called Catalina Island, 26 miles across the sea. And Catalina has their own repeater up on a mountaintop, and it sees both sides of the island. And it was quiet that day until this call came in from a ham That was one of the chaperones aboard that school bus. Listen to this. Unbelievable.
Oh my gosh, there's a school bus with kids on it, and it's like 50 yards south of Falls Canyon on Avalon Canyon Drive. Report from ham operators at scene on the number of patients that might be involved at Control Fire. Would you check with our hospital resources and advise them of the number of casualties and be advised?
So first thing they wanted to find out is how many injured.
Just lost your audio there, Gordo.
Oh, sorry about that. So the big question was, could the hospital be able to handle some of the casualties that would be incoming? And the hospital said, yes, we can do that. And then a ham found that one of the injured students needed a very special medication. Well, this points out that as an emergency communicator, everyone needs to know the phonetic alphabet. On the technician class test, there's only one question about the phonetic alphabet, not the entire alphabet. I think they should have it all down, as this one ham does, as he's relaying his message to the hospital and then backs it up phonetically.
We've got need some medication for one of our trapped car victims and want to know if you have 5 milligrams of amlodipine acetylate. I spell.
Boy, I would hope you could spell it because I can barely say it.
Alpha, Mike, Lima, Oscar, Delta, India, Papa, India, November, Echo. Next word. Bravo, Echo, Sierra, Yankee, Lima, Alpha, Tango, Echo. 5 milligrams.
That was a good job. Normally he would have said the word the second time just to back up his phonetic, but the hospital got it. And that's another question that we ask about emergency communication. Do individual ham teams, such as the many members of your team, do they go to a hospital? Do they have a point that they go to and respond in case of an emergency? Well, the lady operator was surveying and wondering how this school bus just turned over on a relatively wide dirt road, but on a corner. And listen to what she discovered. Again, this is 2 meters. Unbelievable.
The bus collided with the car that we just discovered halfway down the hill at Falls Canyon and Avalon Canyon. It is overturned on the south side of Avalon Canyon Drive. 2 occupants are trapped. We need the jaws of life. Both occupants are alive but severely injured. W6KLX.
Wow, that was fast, but that was a good, accurate report. But could the hospital be able to handle all of the cases now when they start coming in?
Hospital is near capacity with ER teams still able to take unrelated cases.
Well, that's good news. Ham radio reaches throughout the world. We reach into space. We reach everywhere. When Sri Lanka had its major earthquake and huge tsunami, the hams were radioing that those hams in Sri Lanka needed backup.
Sri Lanka reports 31,000 casualties with ocean waters covering all southern and eastern coastlines. The estimate is 800,000 homeless and in need of medical supplies. Ham radio operators needed immediately with high-frequency radios.
So you never know when you're going to get marching orders. Well, until the American Radio Relay League brought up to date their ARES program, they really didn't have good view as to who was where and what training and what equipment they might have for deployment. So I'm very happy to say the new ARES program that the league has developed and continues training, of which maybe many of you are out training as well, will help us identify those teams. And we had such teams go down to Puerto Rico when they had the huge earthquake there. So now let's take a listen up in New York City when Hurricane Sandy hit. and listen to the forecast of this one ham operator working at a National Weather Service for expected winds from
A hurricane will reach the coast early on Thursday. Maximum sustained winds are near 135 miles per hour with higher gusts. Some fluctuation in intensity.
Wow, 135 miles per hour. But you know, I was there a couple of days afterwards in helping, and it was not so much the wind, but the rise of water being pushed ashore by those high winds where everything flooded. Listen.
And your storm surge is greater than 6 feet and hard to measure. QSL?
Wow, storm surge greater than 6 feet. Well, let's go now back to the southern southeastern coast. And here's a hurricane. And here is the United States Coast Guard working with ham radio operators. Take a listen to this.
The Coast Guard was sending somebody in there as soon as they could expedite that. Roger?
The Coast Guard, though, on their aeronautical units, don't necessarily have street maps. They have latitude and longitude. So those hams with a Kenwood D72 or some of the more modern radios here that are able to read out GPS, they were able to give out GPS units. But degrees, minutes, and did you say seconds or did you say fractions of a minute? Well, it's half and half out there in radio land. So make sure that your served agency is going to get the latitude and longitude in the format that they are most familiar with. And maritime is usually fractions of a minute. So something to be thinking about. Well, the Coast Guard was very busy with hams reporting trapped individuals from a senior living center on the roof.
I want the net to know that the 21 people at Fair Street has been received by the Coast Guard, and they are acting on it. No calls on that one. That is done, Dave. Right.
So the Coast Guard was able to get there thanks to a ham with latitude and longitude in degrees, minutes, and fractions of a minute. Well, can anybody help now in New Orleans with Katrina? The Coast Guard was very active there.
Anybody in New Orleans can report or get some action for these people stuck on the roof. So that was the request from Net Control.
More folks stuck on the roof, more latitude and longitude. So many of you that have a handheld that reads out GPS, it's good to be able to read it out in the format that your served agency is going to be looking for. And FEMA, Federal Emergency Management Association, they came in with their vans with one ham on board.
Yeah, if anybody in New Orleans can help these people, is there anybody I can relay? I heard somebody coming out.
So they're looking for the
van. 960, was that you? The FEMA van come now or over?
So a lot of emergency agencies, governmental agencies, are seeing the power of ham radio. When the lights go out, the power fails, repeaters for cell phone go down, and those generators get flooded. The hams miraculously are back on the air again. We've got lithium iron phosphate batteries from Bioenno that last 3 times as long as gelled cells. So we're on the air to stay on the air. But listen to what this one ham in New Orleans says for those hams planning on coming down to...
Tell the crews that come, if they're coming to work on the towers, that they will need generators and fuel for the generators. And basically, they're in essence hitting the beach with no facilities to support them. No facilities support them. Recommend they bring all of their own food and all of their own creature comforts. QSL?
So what's in your grab and go kit? And that's something to think about, because sometimes you're going to be responding for what you think is just an evening shift, and you're there till the next morning, maybe the next afternoon. So those creature comforts from a little bit of food and water and maybe some TP could really come in handy. Finally, the last call from Katrina.
Any support effort from fire departments, Coast Guard, telephone companies coming down, we deeply appreciate it, and we thank you, and hopefully we're in your prayers. W2MRA.
So ham radio plays a mighty important part in all sorts of emergency communications. And ham radio also plays an important part in preparation for a wind event. And all of us have a handheld. We've all got the headset with a little boom mic. Many of us have a little speaker mic that we hang over our shoulder. But when the wind blows, listen to what they sound like at the other end of the circuit when someone is transmitting like this on their shoulder-mounted speaker mic, or the headset with a mic on it, or even just a handheld held up to your lips in the wind. We can always tell when the wind is really blowing. And if you have an important message when the wind is howling, this is what it's Well, no telling what he was saying, but one thing for sure, the wind was definitely getting in the microphone. So I'm very happy to say that ham radio still has an important function when it comes to emergency communications. Our rules are still quite clear about what hams can do. And for those of you that are interested in some of the audio sounds, they are absolutely free for download. Simply go to the w5yi.org and under resources, look for download audio. And these are audio CDs that I produced, one for technician, one for general class, and one for extra class. And these audio CDs, 1 hour long, are not about passing a test. More important, they are, here's what you're going to hear on ham radio and how you can learn skills just by listening to some of the reports coming in over the air. So if you enjoyed some of these sound bites, the majority are there, and they're for you absolutely free, w5yi.org. And their opening page, they've got a long list of resources. Go about 6 down to the download on the air audio CDs from Gordo, and they're for you to use, no copyright, for club meetings and so on. So emergency comms, absolutely still vitally important for ham radio. We touched just on the voice calls. Certainly WinLink and many of the other, Olivia and many of the other data transmissions, equally important because they can lead to a hard list and they're not easily eavesdropped by the media. So we encourage all of you to explore not only the voice modes, but the digital modes, even CW. And here it is. If you watch the screen, even CW plays an important part, especially for maritime mobiles. So this is Gordo, WV6NOA in Southern California. And I've got about 5 to 8 minutes before I need to do a U.S. Coast Guard auxiliary net. So if you have any questions, I'll be happy to put in my earphone and try and answer any questions that you may have with the OKI amateur radio team. So over to you.
All right. Thank you for the presentation. Anybody have questions or comments for him? Just be sure you unmute yourself.
I got a quick one. So you mentioned some of the digital modes, and I'm familiar with WinLink and I'm familiar with CW. I'm not as familiar with Olivia. How is that playing into emergency communication?
The Olivia is used by the U.S. Coast Guard, requires NTIA authorized equipment for the Coast Guard frequencies that are not ham frequencies, but NTIA frequencies. And Olivia is quite amazing in that it can go much lower in the receive capability, signal to noise ratio. And you think, there's no way I'm going to get a message out of this. Yet I can watch the Olivia just pick it out and come right over the screen. So I would say when the signals are quite noisy, that's when some of the digital modes really come through. And we've tried 5 or 6 different digital modes for our Coast Guard auxiliary comms. And Olivia seems to be most robust, and the equipment to use it is nothing more than a sound card, or some radios like the Kenwood 2000 have the capabilities of the TNC built right in. So not much, and it can be received quite easily. And in a case where you have a transceiver and a computer, but it's not all wired in, you can even hold your microphone over the computer audio out and get that Olivia message on the air. So just one of the digital modes that we can use in an emergency.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I think I believe Olivia is the standard for Ohio Digital Emergency Net. I think
Oh, good.
Pretty sure Odin runs on Olivia. It's either that or MT63 or a combination.
Yeah, certainly MT63 is quite effective as well.
Other questions or comments?
I have one real quick.
All right, go ahead, Mark.
So being new to ham radio, I got my general last year. I'm still trying to get involved, and I enjoy, I grew up, I was a newspaper photographer, so I always listened to the police and the fire departments and all the emergency communicators, professionals, I guess you'd call them. And so it was enjoyable listening to them, and it kind of got me sucked into the whole radio thing, and I kind of wanted to become more of an operator for emergency communications here. So I became a storm spotter, but I don't know if it's because of COVID or what the problem getting involved is, but and I'm also kind of distant. So I'm up in Oxford. I'm about 45 minutes from Cincinnati itself. So maybe that's part of the problem too, but I'd like to kind of get involved and see, how I can, where should I look? Should I look for certain frequencies to listen to operators on current calls and things like that? So those are
okay. For storm spotting, certainly the 2-meter 440 band is the most popular one, and they do have many groups that are members of some storm spotters. And I would encourage you to ask your fellow club members, what's the hot group in your particular area for Skywarn or many of those. Skywarn has always played a very important part, but the storm spotters, well, that's a breed of themselves that go out right in the height of these. And the National Weather Service may have a storm spotting crew, and they would be quite interested, I'm sure, with the capabilities of what you may have for equipment to measure wind velocity and the amount of hail and damage that you're able to observe at a distance. But more and more agencies are becoming more and more concerned about liability of volunteers. And it's tough sometimes getting in with those agencies until they really understand that you can add so much for the risk of being out there in those storms. So ask locally, and Skywarn is, of course, the one that is national. And on high frequency, 14300 and 14325 are good spots that you can tune into and hear a lot of good reports coming over from maritime mobiles, as well as those in remote areas reporting storms over high frequency, the 20-meter band.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, and Mark, check the Zoom chat. I put some links in there. Chesley's putting some in as well.
Terrific.
So warn.org, WARN.org is the Cincinnati Skywarn website. Their primary repeater in town is 14688, which is located up in Green Hills area, if I'm not mistaken. We actually have some Skywarn net controls on tonight, I believe.
Okay.
We've also got Hamilton County ARS is active as well, although you're outside of Hamilton County. But Brian Hoffman is he's our EC. He can probably help you get in touch with the EC in your county. And then
Okay.
Queen City Emergency Net is also our Red Cross Club. We have representatives from them in the group tonight too. So those are three different local emergency groups that you might get involved with. And of
All
course,
right.
we're happy to have you too.
A little closer to would be the Butler County areas up here in Hamilton.
Yeah, I just don't have a contact for that. So if anybody
Okay.
has a contact, throw it in the chat. Butler
I'll-
County areas.
Okay.
Well, very good. Well, I certainly appreciate this opportunity to talk to serious hams that see our future, not just in exchanging signal reports and doing contests. The contests and the signal reports really help hone our skills for when the chips are down and we have an emergency message to get out. So I encourage all of you to be thinking about emergency comms, be thinking about how you can stay on the air when the entire neighborhood goes dark due to power outage and so on, and be active. When people pass the test, that's about 5% of what ham radio is all about. It may seem like 100% getting through that first exam, as we have one of your members tonight preparing for. But once you get the test out of the way, that's like your entree to what ham radio is all about. And find what you enjoy most and show the skills that you can bring to that particular type of operation. Be safe when you're out there in an emergency, and welcome aboard to a fabulous hobby and a great fraternity. So thank you all so much for having me on board. I've got to go on an alternate net now, and I hope to work you sometime soon in a non-emergency on HF, VHF, Echolink, you name it, IRLP. I'm out here. 73 to you all.
Thank you very much, Gordo.
Thank you
Thanks for
very
joining
much.
us. Have a good evening.
You've got it.